I want to start with this game. I have a brand new game.
I love games.
New game. It's Game Changer.
That's us.
Can we legally say that?
I'm sure that I don't think Sam would do anything.
Sam Reich, come on this podcast and tell us that we can't do it.
Yeah.
That's a dare. So I received a text from a good friend of mine and friend of the show, Rod Kim, who did our music for the show. He is a good friend of mine, and he saw the movie the newest Transformers last night.
I'm so sorry.
The one with cars that turn into animals?
That's
the Beast Wars one, right? That's the big thing.
Do the cars turn into animals? I don't know how that actually works.
I've only ever seen the animals. What do the animals turn into? Do they turn into rocks?
Into robots
and trees, but they're
What's
gorilla robots.
it called? They're doing Beast Wars. If you remember Beast Wars in the 90s, that was like the sequel show to Transformers. That was like crappy early 90s 3D animation, and it was animals that turned into robots.
But
in like a post-apocalyptic or pre-human Earth that had 2 moons. It was a very confusing show.
Yeah, wow.
But Trace, you've hit on something that I hadn't even thought about, because I genuinely don't know if the animals turn into cars, and that would be very fun for me. That would actually make me want to see the movie more. I have no idea. So Rod went and saw the movie, and he texted me immediately at 3:15 a.m.
He's on the West Coast.
He's on the West Coast, so this was this was midnight for him. It was 3:15 a.m. for me, because he had to tell me that this new Transformers movie does touch on the topic of ancient aliens. And I would love each of you to guess how Transformers, in a broad sense, you don't have to do specifically, how do you think Michael Bay handled the idea of ancient aliens and Transformers? And whoever's closest, there are no points, but I'll give you a point. Why not? Hey, future editing Scott here for an immediate correction. Michael Bay did not direct this new Transformers movie, but it was at least produced in part by Michael Bay. Don't write in telling us I got this wrong. Michael Bay was involved, okay? Tristan, you want to go first? Ancient aliens expert.
How much do I want to bet that somebody's going to uncover like Mayan hieroglyphics that show like almost like a King Pakal-esque calendar stone, but it's like Optimus Prime in a like extremely culturally offensive way.
Okay. Oh, no. Good guess.
I was thinking of it more from a cinematography standpoint. Like, obviously something's going to fall, like come down out of a foggy, cloudy sky. You know, that kind of a thing where it's just like, oh, it appears there's an alien. And then, you know, kind of similarly culturally insensitive, instead of Native Americans or like indigenous people standing on a shore, it's robots standing on a shore looking at the aliens or something, like, or animals rather standing on the shore looking at the aliens. You know, and they're just like, ooh, look, there's something in the sky, and then the thing comes down the cloud and it's like, there's an alien. Oh, and that's why we have sentience.
Apropos of today's episode, actually.
Yes. So both of you seem to have this guess that it's probably treated in a not very culturally sensitive way.
Michael Bay, the person who gave a robot balls, is going to do something in a not exactly culturally sensitive way.
I am unaware of this thing that Michael Bay has done.
The Transformers movies
Transformers
are wild.
movie has one, robot's balls, and 2, one of the robots just takes a big old piss on a guy. Those are 2 things that happen in a movie made by an adult for seemingly other adults. I don't know. I don't even know if it's worse if it's for adults or kids.
All right.
I Googled it. I shouldn't have Googled it. I Googled it. Shouldn't have.
It's a wrecking ball transformer. Guess where the wrecking ball goes.
Yeah,
no.
I'm grossed out. I'm grossed out. That's not great.
I am shocked to reveal that apparently, according to, I've not seen the movie or the full context, but according to Rod, Michael Bay does a good thing where it seems like a human starts to credit all of things, like specifically the Nazca lines and the pyramids and all that stuff, trying to say that all that stuff wasn't what came from the Transformers. And Optimus Prime like butts in and says, no, we had nothing to do with any of that, and we wouldn't take credit for human ingenuity.
Oh,
can you believe?
Wow, surprise face turn from Michael Bay.
Holy cow.
That's great.
Well done.
Yeah. Jeez.
All right.
Well, congratulations to them, I guess. You did one thing right.
Yeah.
And still gave a robot balls, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's that one's going to sit for a while.
I didn't want to know that. Although, if they are wrecking balls and they're very heavy, it makes it, a low center of mass. So that's good for stability.
Yeah.
I think there's actually like a line in the movie where one of the humans is like on the like the sort of walkie-talkies that all protagonists have in action movies. They can all talk to each other somehow. Yeah. And he's just like, I'm underneath the robot's testicles. And he says that, like, that's the words said in the script.
That's the first movie. They led with that one. It was in the first
the only
Transformers.
One I've seen. Yep. Because after I saw that one, I was like, you know what? I don't need to see any more of these ever again.
I feel like I did the same thing. I've sort of like blocked it out. Like when, you go see a movie and you're like, did I see that? Oh, I did.
I remember I did not want to see it, but I had a friend who, because it came out around the same time the Star Trek movie came out, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie.
Yeah.
And as like the worst Trekkie of all time, like worse than like, it is sad how much I am a Trekkie. I was like, all right, I want you to see the Star Trek movie. And he was like, it's Star Trek. I don't want to see that. I'm like, all right, I'll see your stupid Transformers movie if you go see the Star Trek movie. And we agreed to this transaction. And I don't think either of us were happy with the results.
Oh, no.
But this is a podcast, I think.
Oh, yeah. By the way, we're recording a podcast. This is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens, where we look into ancient astronaut theory and debunk the TV show Ancient Aliens. We look at it for goofs and gaffs, and then hopefully by the end of the episode, you learn about real world history of cool people, places, things, moments in time. Who knows? My name is Scott Nicewander. I am the co-host that knows nothing, basically. I come into this show just equipped with what Michael Bay has recently done. And that's the only thing I've prepared.
Provider of Michael Bay facts.
Yep.
I'm Tristan Johnson. I'm the one who goes into the dark depths of research and comes out with a thing that makes your life slightly less happy for knowing that this is a thing people believe. But hopefully also have happy things that'll teach you about real history and stuff like that. And I'm so excited. I am so excited, Scott, because we've got Trace Dominguez, a person I've been a fan of for, I think like nigh on a decade. I feel like you've been doing content for because I think you were like, you kind of came onto the scene with like the pivot to video movement in like 2013, which was 10 years ago now.
Yeah. I've been doing video for a long time. I started a YouTube channel in 2012 that people may have heard of called D News, and that now is called Seeker, and it's owned by Vox. And I was doing video before that. And I'm a science communicator, I guess, but I didn't know what that was when I started doing it. It was just like, hey, I like science and I can talk about it in front of a camera if I try real hard. And I've been doing it ever since.
Now you got the YouTube channel Uno Dose of Trace.
Correct. A double pun, which I can't really, it's too exciting to not, except for every time I go and tell somebody about it, it like takes them a second. They're like, wait, what? Oh, ha! And it's like, yep, that's the feeling that I wanted you to have.
Perfect. It's a great channel. Everyone should watch it.
I've also got a new podcast called That's Absurd, Please Elaborate with my buddy Julian, who you'd also recognize from the D News Seeker team. Because now that team no longer exists, I'm like, I'm going to take people and make good stuff.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so just to tack on to what Tristan was saying, like I definitely like D News back in those days was a huge part of my like online YouTube. Like I would watch that daily. So also big
Test
fan
Tube.
over here.
I remember it was called Test Tube at one point.
Yeah, we had multiple channels. Test Tube was like the politics and news channel, which then became, okay, you ready for this? So it started as Test Tube, which everybody was like, wait, shouldn't Test Tube be the science channel and D News be the news channel? And we were like, yeah, it probably should be, but we didn't do that. And I didn't make any of these decisions. And then Test Tube got renamed to Test Tube News, and then Test Tube News got renamed to Seeker Daily, which was a show that we'd already started and then canceled, but we used the name again because it made more sense, like a newspaper. And then it was bought by Group 9, so it became Now This News, or Now This World. And then it was bought by Vox, and now I think it's independent again. Woo!
Woo!
Good. Jeez.
Talk about like an organization that has had, like, you could write a book about the story of this little media org.
I mean, the day that SourceFed became, or SourceFed Nerd, they tried to like rebrand with a whole new thing.
Oh, yeah.
Like a whole new cast, and they lost like 250,000 subscribers in like 3 hours or something. And yeah, I was in the office that day watching it happen. And I was just like, this is, and I tweeted about it and then got called into the office, to my boss's office. And he was like, you tweeted about this? And I'm like, I'll take it down. It's fine. Yeah. People have seen it who need to see it.
Fair enough. I have a question for the two of you. Do you believe it's possible that the human race, which we are all famously members of, as far as we know, some emails we get seem to disagree with this notion.
That's true. You and me, we get emails that bring into question our existence,
our humanity.
Yep.
But do you think that we are genetically engineered creatures? That's the question we're going to answer today.
Like on purpose or by accident? Because like I've seen Prometheus, and I think that one was sort of like, I couldn't remember if that one was on purpose or by accident.
Yeah. Are we Prometheus? That is the question. That is the question we're answering today.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
Are we, so basically, Ancient Aliens has gone into this in several episodes, and so I've collected all of the clips I can, and it's a common thing in sci-fi and in certain UFO-based cults that the theory that aliens at some point intervened in human evolution or genetically engineered the human race altogether. So I'll go into a little bit because I have verbatim quotes that show what level of high debate reasoning we're using here. So
I would love you to read some.
Charles Darwin, the result of his studies formed the basis for his controversial book, The Origin of Species. In it, Darwin proposed his theory of evolution, which held that all life evolved over time through a process of natural selection. But even Darwin's theories could not explain the developmental gap between apes and man. There was, if it was believed, a transitional species that had to exist, one which became referred to as the missing link. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Oh, wait, I have sound effects. Hold on.
Wait a minute.
I have sound effects somewhere. Oh, yeah.
Ooh. Yeah.
Wow.
Homo sapiens have been around for 300,000 years, and only in a few thousand years our brain size essentially tripled. Citation needed. Now that does not jive with our ordinary evolution. You need time, a very long time. However, today, biologists cannot quite put a finger on how our brain volume tripled in such a short period of time. It's a mystery. Could it be, as many ancient astronaut theorists believe, that ancient aliens had a hand in jumpstarting human evolution on our planet? Science has been unable to find the missing link, and maybe that's simply because Earth is unable to offer that missing link.Maybe the missing link is not of this Earth. Maybe the missing link is somewhere outside, extraterrestrial. Now, building on that, they cite a scientist. And if you are a person who follows science and this name comes up, immediately the red flag should start going on, because this guy is a Nobel Prize winner who is mostly known for stealing somebody else's work and then claiming credit for it and then winning a Nobel Prize for it and then saying a bunch of stuff about supporting eugenics. So Francis Crick, after discovering the structure of DNA in 1953, he did not discover it.
No.
Somebody else did.
Oh, good. That
she
seems
just
good.
did not get credit for it for reasons beyond our knowledge. Stated that human DNA was too complex to have evolved over a 4.5 billion year history on Earth. Crick proposed the theory of directed panspermia, suggesting that DNA may have been seeded on Earth from another star system, and that this involves an intelligent entity seeding Earth with genes that made humans.
We've talked about panspermia before a little bit, right? Yeah.
And like, it's one of those things that's like, it's not outside of like scientific reasonability to think that something like that could have happened. It's just that like there's no evidence to point towards it, and there's nothing that really makes a good case for it.
Yeah.
But it's like one of those things that really fossil evidence, not even fossil, like you're dealing with like really early Earth stuff is very spotty and hard to get real stuff from.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if an asteroid hit the planet after life already existed, then we would see that in our genetic code, right? Like it would not only would it be unlikely that a random asteroid would fall to Earth and be compatible with life as it exists. So if it didn't exist, then it would also be unlikely that it would be exactly the same kind of chemical makeup that it would be able to survive here. It just doesn't. It's crazy.
Now, this is the same show that also tries to make the claim that humans and aliens can interbreed successfully. So we're not exactly dealing with the most scientific rigor.
They also flip-flop between, because there are some episodes, there's some theories where they're like, actually, what aliens are they're humans from the future who time traveled back in time, and they look so different that they look like aliens. And so they actually aren't from different planets or universe or like, galaxies or anything. They're just more humans. So they get sort of mixed up on like on what aliens are, I guess, sometimes. So there's just a lot of theories floating about on this show.
Oh, there's a few more terms I get to use that are words I put on a box of things that give biologists, make biologists start reaching for the Advil. The next one is they say that, well, the evidence for our genetic engineering could be in our junk DNA, which
I've embarrassingly used that term before, and I got eviscerated for it, and was like, oh, okay, yeah.
Quick filling in is like a lot of our DNA is what's called non-coding DNA, which doesn't necessarily do anything actively, and a lot of it is like old retroviruses or remnants of mutations from ages ago that didn't exactly hurt us, but didn't exactly help us, so it just sort of stayed.
Yeah,
and sometimes it does become useful, and it does have, like, as we kind of understand epigenetics more, it does come into play in ways that we don't quite appreciate because biology is obnoxiously complicated and we don't understand. We're just at the tipping point of what we actually know for things to do.
And,
but okay.
And Trace, just to go back to that, you being like made fun of for using that phrase, I'll do you one better. One of my earliest and still today most popular YouTube videos was about the science of Thor's hammer. And I said in the video that there's a moment where a character pushes Thor's hammer out of the way and they're flying through space or something like that. And it's like, well, how's that possible? Only Thor can like lift the hammer. And I said, well, it's probably possible because there's no gravity in space, is what I said. And if you can believe that the comment section tore me apart for saying that.
I can believe that.
So we've all been there.
Okay. There's one higher level this gets to. We get to an extra plane of existence, and here's where we go. And this is another one where every biologist hang on to your seats. So it's possible that at one point, actually this is a true fact, that at one point there were possibly 8 human species on Earth at a point about several, like a few 100,000 years ago. This is the thing. We're talking, this episode is predominantly about a world in which we were like the closest to like Middle Earth that we ever lived, where there were multiple species of humans with like different physical and mental characteristics around the planet. And it's wild that was just part of the world for a while. But here's the thing. In 2010, doctors at the Texas Heart Institute discovered a man who had a 3-chambered heart similar to that of a reptile. This condition was attributed to atavism, an evolutionary phenomenon where traits of distinct ancestors or distant ancestors reemerge in modern organisms. This is a common thing. The fact that we have hiccups is an atavistic trait from when we used to be lungfish.
Yeah, I made a video about this many years ago, and I was talking about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles of all things, where Bebop and Rocksteady were like humans that were turned into animals. And I was like, well, maybe they had, atavistic, traits from something. I was just trying to connect it. It wasn't like a real thing, but I was just like, it's just a really interesting idea to talk about this. Yeah. Like this idea that you have traits from previous like evolutionary states or something like that is really interesting.
Yeah. And here's where it gets extra sensitive to certain things. So then they basically are trying to build a case that humans were genetically engineered with alien DNA, specifically of the Anunnaki reptilian variety.
Oh, we're back.
So the three. Have you not delved into the world of internet crankery to know what a reptilian is?
I mean, I know I've seen comments on the YouTubes about being a reptile person.
Yeah,
I just assumed it was like that guy from Batman.
There's a conspiracy movement that tries to say that the world is being secretly manipulated by reptile aliens from the planet Nibiru who can shapeshift. And it's a very long-winded way to say Jews without saying Jews, essentially.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we get into that territory a lot with the show. Welcome to it's probably not aliens. So another genetic condition that could suggest that we were genetically engineered by reptilians is a disease that gives you dry, scaly skin called ichthyosis. Or a disease that fuses your fingers and gives you claw-like hands, which is called syndactyly and ectodactyly. I will say, just to kind of build on this, ichthyosis is a horrific disease that actually typically people born with it don't live more than a few days because your skin basically is just incapable of healing itself very well, and it just cracks and falls apart. It is the people born with it have a very short and extremely painful life. It is a horrific thing. And the fact that they're just kind of like launching on that, like I feel like only a handful of people have ever survived like the first few days of life with this disease, and it's terrible. And the other one is like a common type of genetic anomaly that happens in species across the spectrum of like fused fingers and stuff like that. It's like we have cats have extra fingers. Are they aliens?
Yeah,
maybe. You got to ask Hemingway.
That's, we have this sort of running theory on the show that, what is it? Animals with double E's are aliens, because geese are aliens. What was the other one? Sheep are aliens.
Sheep and
Someone
geese,
asked if bees are aliens. Cats so far are in the clear, I think.
So far.
It's any double letter, or it has to be a double E?
So far it's been double E, but I could be swayed either way.
And I'm just saying, because kitten has two T's in it, and T has an E sound in it. I'm just saying, like, it's like alphaology, like numerology, but for letters.
This is good.
We can expand the definition, because geese is also goose, which means double O's are applicable, and
that is true. It's not a single goose is an alien, but all geese are aliens.
So there you go. It's complicated. You understand. So what this is a common trope, which is a term called uplifting. It is not a trope of science. It's a trope of science fiction, of basically aliens showing up at a place and using genetic engineering to increase the intelligence of an animal to be sentient or sapient. You might know them from such works as H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, which was the first novel with the concept that depict surgical and psychological transformations of animals into human-like creatures. Most famous would probably be David Brin's Uplift series, which features an Earth where a lot of different animals start getting uplifted. But you might also know them from Planet of the Apes.
Sure.
The attempt to make a grim, dark reboot of Planet of the Apes in the last few decades, that turned out surprisingly all right. 2001: A Space Odyssey is essentially this. And another one called Children of Time that I don't know the answer to, but also games like Mass Effect and Spore and Stellaris have all incorporated uplift. It's a very big sci-fi trope.
I'm a huge Mass Effect fan. Remind me how that played into Mass Effect, because I don't remember now.
The Drell were uplifted by the Hanar to save them from the desertification of their home planet. The Ektor and the Vorcha were uplifted by the Asari.
Okay.
The Krogan were uplifted by the Solarians to use for soldiers against the Arachni.
I can tell you don't play Mass Effect, do you, Tristan? Or haven't played Mass Effect?
I got to Mass Effect 2, and I got to a fight that I couldn't win without paying attention or doing. I didn't want to do any of the abilities or do any of the squad leading stuff. I just wanted to shoot stuff, and it disappeared. And I got one encounter that was too hard, and I just stopped playing it forever.
Fair enough. No, I only asked because like the way, like, it's just one of those minor things, but I was like, Tristan is so close to pronouncing these aliens correctly. He's like a little bit off.
Oh no.
But no, that helps. Thank you.
I don't know if you've seen the new Guardians of the Galaxy, but this uplifting comes into play there as well.
I mean, Rocket is basically an uplifted raccoon. Yeah,
that's right. It's like be the most like a broad base example, maybe, because I read The Island of Dr. Moreau when I was a kid, but I don't know how many people read that book anymore.
I played in a Fate Core science, like a sort of space opera campaign where my character was an uplifted panda who had no combat abilities but lots of money. Just a crime lord.
That sounds fun. It's like, I mean, I would watch that movie. Who needs Kung Fu Panda? Give me
Gangster Panda.
Give me Power Broker Panda. Like, I'm into that.
It was great. It was great. Okay, the other term that came up is the missing link, which is a very headache-inducing term for a lot of people who do science communication. It was this idea, it basically comes from, and we'll get into this later, it comes from when evolution was trying to make the case for itself against the consensus, which was essentially young Earth creationism at the time. And the missing link was like, well, what is this bridge between apes and humans if humans are derived from apes, which is one, a mischaracterization because we're more cousins of apes than delineated from apes.
Sure.
Yeah.
And there's a really great sequence from Futurama, actually, that basically explains why the missing link makes no sense. I don't know if you might have seen this gag. It was pretty big when it came out a while back.
Yeah.
It was basically like, look, there's like humans and apes. And they're like, okay, well, what's the missing link between, like, look, you can't find any fossils between these two. Yeah, it's this one, Australopithecus. Well, what's the link between Australopithecus and humans? Oh, it's this one. And then
what's the link between that?
Like 6 hours, and there's like this huge line of fossils, and they're like, now what's the link between this one and this one? It's like,
well, this was this was a guy named Dave. Dave came between these two. Like at a certain point, it's just like, it's wild.
It's fallen out of favor because with people, because it implies linear evolution, which is also not the case. The other part, we're going to talk about human evolution today, and human evolution is one of the most messy things I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's a lot.
We are a messy species, and the idea that like linear evolution is a thing, like we go back and forth and traits appear and disappear, kind of going into that non-coding DNA until it decides to come back later. And one thing I learned doing this is that species is sort of a tough concept to nail down, because you can sometimes breed with other species, and I mean, we have mules for that reason. But
are you telling me that alien human hybrids, they could work?
They have to be very highly related species.
All right.
And oftentimes it causes issues like every time, like a mule is a crossbreed between a donkey and a horse, but because of chromosomal mismatch, they basically can't, they're sterile. Any mule born is sterile.
So I don't know if
Liger, same story. You can lion and tiger.
Yeah. I don't know if Mass Effect ever had hybrids, but they definitely had, all the games did feature a point where you could have a romance options with aliens, but I don't think that ever did anything past. I don't think any children came of that. I think they're cowards.
On the biological scale, like human beings, like human embryos we can't even interbreed with our closest non-human relatives today. And I hate the fact that there has been scientific studies to prove that. But like our closest relatives, bonobos and chimpanzees, like are too distant from us to actually be able to successfully interbreed. So.
Gotcha.
And get your head out of the gutter. They use test tubes.
Are you telling me that the Klingon human hybrid B'Elanna Torres from the documentary Star Trek Voyager isn't a real person?
That's wild.
I think they even imply in Enterprise and in some other places that the way that they interbreed in Star Trek 1 comes from the fact that they are all actually descended from one species, but 2, there's like a lot of modern medicine involved.
Got it.
Because there's like an episode of Enterprise where T'Pol and Trip Tucker try to have a baby, but the baby doesn't dies in vitro because they're too genetically distant. And they're like, well, maybe someday science will be powerful enough to actually merge these two DNAs and actually have like a viable species. And they're like implying, oh, it's going to be Spock, but so there's science involved, I guess. So they do science. Fun. And then genes can happen.
Cool.
Yeah. And the thing about, so basically the missing link thing is that there's the scarcity of transitional fossils is just because if you know anything about fossils, we don't have a lot of them.
Yeah. Out of all the things that have lived and died, we don't have most of those around anymore.
To make a fossil, we basically have to have things that died in a way where their bodies did not decompose right away. So like either a very dry environment or they got buried very fast. And then that environment had to essentially not change significantly for the entire time that happened. So like you find a lot of places, like you find a lot of dinosaurs, for example, in like Mongolia's Gobi Desert, because it's been a desert for like millions of years.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but like, yeah, fossils aren't even, because I think there could potentially be, at least for me, there's been like a misunderstanding, I guess, of like fossils. I guess sometimes like they're not the actual bones though, right? It's just like rocks. No. It's like what rocks think bones look like, basically.
It's like,
that's a good way to describe it. Yeah.
I like to think of it as like the Body Worlds exhibit, like the plastination, where like the body isn't actually there. You're not actually looking at cells. You're looking at the plastic where the cells used to be. Fossils are similar, right? It's like rock where the cell used to be. And so like it turns into mineral, but it's not actually the bone. And I was just at the La Brea Tar Pits this weekend because I have a toddler and we need to do things.
That sounds awesome, though, actually.
And it's the weekend. What are we doing? We're going outside.
Oh, my God. Yes.
I go to the park every weekend now because the option is, do we walk in circles and watch Bluey or do we go to the park?
There's only so many episodes of Bluey.
It's only 150 and I burned through them. I've burned through them almost twice already.
But the La Brea Tar Pits, for those people who don't know, maybe you've heard about it in pop culture. It's basically an asphalt pond, kind of. It's like an oil field, like a regular oil field that is nearish the surface. And so like for even in indigenous times, like when Native Americans would walk around in this area of Los Angeles, what is now Los Angeles, there is these like asphalt lakes near the surface, and they have water on top of them. So animals would wander in to get the water, probably not great for them. But even worse for them was that once you're in the tar, it is literally like crude oil, and they're stuck. And so then we looked at all these giant chunks of what is essentially asphalt that they've excavated from the ground here in LA, and they're just like brushing through them and taking out chunks to get fossils. But even the fossils are, they're teeny tiny little teeny bits. Yeah.
It's why the only the only things that we've been able to do, like why we can get for example, mammoth DNA is because they're finding them from not fossils, but like actual corpses of mammoths that died in frozen places that have been consistently frozen since they died.
Yes. Yeah. There was an example of that at the Page Museum at the Tar Pits. Like it was a recreation of a mammoth that they found, but it was in like Siberia or something, a frozen tundra where it hadn't been unfrozen since this poor little baby like fell in a tar pit or something. And that was that. It's just like they have all these things, but we don't know that much about it because there's not that many.
Yeah. So the fact that like the human, especially tropical species, human remains or the sort of transitional fossils between humans and apes have not been found. It has to do with the fact that the fossil record is woefully incomplete. And we've been able to do some very fascinating things. Paleontologists they were able to use like scanning electron microscopes to study the structure of dinosaur feathers to figure out what color they would have been. Like there's some fascinating stuff that's been able to be done with fossils. But again, it's still a woefully incomplete thing.
Don't we like build the whole fossil record, even some of those bits? And I'm kind of extrapolating from what I remember, but don't we build whole parts of the fossil record from like, oh, well, we have a finger bone from that we think is from this species. We have like part of a spine from this species here, and then we're pretty sure that that's a separate thing. We're going to break it down. And obviously, there's a lot of science and expertise that goes into it, and debate and argument. But like, they're not working with, oh, we found an entire skeleton.
Right.
Look, and it says its name is Ralph, and this guy over here, his name is Etienne. He's French, so there must be different. It's still like it's not like that.
a fully intact skeleton is like a unicorn of archaeology or paleontology. Like I think that they get really excited if something like that is ever found. So then it's like the thing is like missing links have been brought up over the years. Some of the most famous one would be like Neanderthals were sometimes referred to as transition or as the missing link. They weren't. Java Man, Piltdown Man, which was the famous hoax from a few episodes ago we talked about. Tong Child, Heidelberg Man, Homo habilis, Lucy, the first discovery Australopithecus in I want to say either South Africa or the DRC. And so like there's all these different things, but it's not a thing. It's much more complicated than that. And so I want to talk about the story about how humans happened.
Oh, okay, cool.
The human origin story.
How do we get here?
Wow. Yeah, tell me.
So the humans first began when primates first broke off from other species about 65 million years ago, when basically there were these giant birds that basically made it hard for any other, families of animals to really cut it out in the world. Then we got hit by...
They were like flying hobbits to and from Mordor. It's just, they were... it was complicated.
There were giant birds flying people to Mordor. There were giant birds eating people on toilets. There were giant birds... There's just an age where birds basically ran the planet. Might know them as dinosaurs.
I see. Not the flying ones.
Some of them flew. Well, some of them dinosaurs didn't flow. They were flying reptiles or whatever.
There you go.
Get off me, paleontologists. But then the age of the giant birds ended when they couldn't handle a little Chicxulub crater or Chicxulub asteroid that basically wiped out 90-something% of all life on Earth and turned the average temperature of the planet into that of the inside of a pizza oven for a bit. So we broke off when mammals finally got the evolutionary space to fill all of these niches that had previously belonged to dinosaurs. The oldest known primate mammal was Plesiaptus, discovered in North America and Archicebus in China. And early primates flourished in Eurasia and later migrated into Africa, where they flourished into a bunch of different niches and became a whole bunch of different primate species.
Yeah.
This led to a lot of diversification, especially a lot of apes that started to become prominent in arboreal habitats, which, like, at the time, Africa was full of forest. And so a lot of these primates adapted to living in the forests.
Gotcha. Arboreal. I know what that was.
It's a good word.
I put my stems together with that one. Yeah.
I like that word.
Then the Earth went through a very strange new phase where it decided that it was going to go through periods of being very dry and very cold for long periods of time.
Oh, I thought it was going to be puberty.
Basically.
Started having feelings that I was confused about.
If anything, the Anthropocene is going to be our awkward puberty phase as like the planet breaks out in humans everywhere. But basically, Africa and the Mediterranean dried up really hard because the Earth's temperature started to plummet. And tropical jungles and things like that, not huge fans of cold, dry temperatures. And so a lot of these regions moved from being jungly forests to being savanna grasslands.
Okay.
Huh.
And this is around the time where hominoid type species come through. Now, there was an adaptation, and we see this in some species of apes today, where they walk on two legs to move through branches. You might see like gibbons doing stuff like this and such.
Okay.
So that technique of being able to move through the trees started to become adapted for living in the savannas and the grasslands of this new African plain, which gave them good vision, gave them the use of their front hands, and eventually we adapted to get better and better at standing more and more on our hind legs for long periods of time. And the thing that basically diverges hominids from primates is the adaptation to primarily walking on our back legs.
And now look at us, all three of us sitting down.
Got it. Sitting down.
And it's like, oh God, now I have to walk on my back legs. This is so much work.
I have a standing desk and I'm not even using it right now.
You're actually hitting on something pretty profound, because this evolution is relatively recent. And so the evolution of walking on our hind legs is not exactly optimal. And so it might be the reason why humans have so many back problems and hip problems is because they're recent adaptations and we haven't really worked out the kinks. And so while it was better at adaptation and let us produce more children, it wasn't exactly great for living past 35. And now everybody's got back pain.
Have you seen the person on TikTok? This is old news, but have you seen the person on TikTok who's been training themselves to walk and run on all fours efficiently?
Yeah.
And they're terrifyingly good at it. The walking is one thing, but when they started learning how to run on all fours, it's scary. It scares me how ferocious it looks.
Wow.
I don't remember if there was a point to them doing that other than just to see if they could, but good on them, I guess.
Humans have done dumber things for more extreme things for dumber reasons. So humans had this evolution to adapt to open woodlands, shrublands, grasslands, and this happened in different it allowed us to move into different habitats, which we couldn't before, which was very useful. For evolution, being able to survive in different habitats, very good. Look at the crocodile. Good. It can survive in a billion different places, and that's why they've been around for 200 million years or something insane like that. And then we also got a lot of, you can see in the fossil record when we start to have more, when we start to go bipedal, we start to move into new habitats, and you see the changes in the pelvis and the spine and all these things as we adapt. And also the front hands start adapting so that they no longer need to carry our weight, and we start using them for other things. Also, humans look weird compared to primates because our limbs are way more elongated than others, and that is also part of this change. Human feet evolved to no longer be prehensile, so we no longer needed to grab things with our feet, and we no longer needed to walk on our hands, and so they both specialized into their different roles.
But I can grab things with my feet, Christian. I can.
As a person with a toddler, I also agree. And you have to get the bottle from underneath the table or something when you decide to drop it on the floor.
Right. I can't. I practiced, and I can pick up a tennis ball if I really want to, or at least I could when I was more dexterous.
When we were much younger, one of my siblings used to play, I think Galaga with a joystick and everything with her feet. She was good at it, and I don't know why she started doing that, but it was just like a fun challenge. And it's weird.
That's
it's weird
cool.
what people can do.
She should be the person who's learning to like walk on all fours. I feel like they have a lot in common. But the thing is, we don't actually have a solid theory about why bipedalism was so advantageous. Some have theorized that it's because we were able to see better. Some have theorized that it had us increase our speed, that it allowed us to do more tool use or carry objects or wade when swimming, or of course the ongoing one, sexual display. We were just hotter when we were standing on our hind legs.
Yeah, our wrecking balls just out there for everybody to see.
Yeah, and more energy conservation, which is a pretty interesting one, because if there is like the soup, you know how like animals all have their special super. One of ours, besides the brain thing, is that we have, because of we sweat a lot too, we can actually we were able to hunt down animals that were a lot faster than us because we were just ridiculously persistent, because we could just chase them forever until they got tired. And so humans are like
hustle grind,
really good at that long distance running type thing.
Yeah. Isn't that kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about crocodiles, wasn't it? That you said can be in a lot of different places. Like if we can be bipedal, we can move through forests, we can move through grasslands, we can move through wetlands, we can move through mountains, we can it sort of allows us to do all of these different things that it's almost a specialization by being less specialized,
Exactly.
I don't know.
And then we get to Homo sapiens, which evolved from several other hominid species that lived about 6 million years ago. But when we get into the point where we live in ancient Middle Earth, was about 550 to 750,000 years ago. Evolutionarily, not that long period of time, but the common ancestor of modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans lived sometime around there. So this is some very fast, very interesting evolution. So that's the beginning of the Homo genus, which is homogeneous. The Homo genus, that is where we all we are the only living descendants of it. So about 2 million years ago, the Homo genus started appearing. Anatomically modern humans appeared about 300,000 years ago.
Okay.
The oldest known Homo sapien fossils were found in Jebel Kirhoud in Morocco. And there's a lot of debate over different African hominid species, their classification in the Australopithecus genus, which is another closely related genus to humans, and the potential existence of a separate genus called Paranthropus. This is an animal classification chat that gets into it. We are humanity, and the Homo genus in specific is a profoundly messy bitch of a genus. As you'll see, the first documented relative of the genus Homo to use stone tools was called Homo habilis.
All right.
Yeah.
And this then preceded what they call in science rapid encephalization, which is essentially us getting an increased cranial capacity. And you start seeing that in species like Homo erectus and Homo ergaster, which were the first to apparently have evidence of using fire and complex tools, and the first to leave the African continent. So this is wild, because before humans, there was fire and tools, which, if you think about it, is kind of wild.
Yeah. There's always these talks of who invented the wheel, who invented sliced bread, who invented fire, who invented tools, right? It's humans did some of those things, but not all of those things. Some of them were done by other species, and we just took it and ran with it.
And it's also interesting because we've talked on this show before about how sometimes the invention of the wheel is used as a way to be were these distinct separate cultures, were they smart enough? Were they able to create this technology? And sometimes the answer is they just didn't need it, or they came up with other solutions that were much smarter.
Also, the wheel requires a lot of other inventions in order to be useful. If you live in a mountainous region where roads are almost impossible to build, wheels don't mean anything.
Wheels mean nothing to you. Right.
Yeah.
That's why you see in the ancient Inca invented the mecha suit, the Gundam, before they invented wheels.
That's great. Didn't Neanderthals have art and other? I mean, they believe that they had art and other kind of pursuits that they could have because they were smart enough to do it. But it's not like they. I don't know.
Yeah.
To what you're talking about in terms of wheels, it's saying, oh well, they invented the wheel, so they must be special. And it's well, a lot of different things had a lot of different species had a lot of different bits of art. The wheel without a road is pretty silly. But the wheel without an axle, the wheel without a wheelbarrow, the wheel without literally any
Yeah.
I feel like there's a Far Side comic about this where it's just a guy who's like, I've invented the wheel. And they're like, okay, what do we do with it? You know, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The wheel is, the invention came after the need.
Right.
Yeah, precisely. And so there was this period where hominids or the Homo genus spread across Eurasia and Africa and diversified into a bunch of different species that were not humans as they are today. Although now the better term, and I think this is pretty useful to say, is that they now call it the human family, which is that they were all humans. They just were not all the same species. And so this is where you had like Neanderthals, which evolved, which primarily lived in like the Mediterranean and around like Spain and France. This is why you have my caveman-esque figures, which come from thousands of years of French peasants.
So it's sort of like the Olive Garden of history, you know?
Yeah.
When you're here,
Your family.
Your family.
When you're here, your Homo family.
You're a Homo family. I like that.
Happy Pride, everyone.
And we keep discovering new members of the human family across Eurasia, including some of the more, and outside of Eurasia, we even have the most recent discovery of Homo, I want to say florensis in the Oceanic Islands, the sort of islands between Asia and Australia, and they were nicknamed the Hobbit people because they were like a human species that was like very small.
That's cool.
So
I called a guy at the Smithsonian once to do a video, and he mentioned there was something like 20 or 25 known human species. I just looked up my notes because I was like, this sounds familiar. Yeah, they said his name was Rick Potts. It's cool. He said,
"Oh yeah, we're about to talk about Rick Potts."
Oh great!
Oh, that's awesome.
He's very friendly. He said, yeah, there have been 20 to 25 different species of early humans discovered so far, and they can be grouped in kind of 4 different groups: Paranthropus, Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, and Homo.
Yeah, that's us.
Oh, that's great.
For another example would be Neanderthals. Neanderthals were more squat. They had larger noses than us, and a lot of the theorizing is that they were basically adapted for living in colder climates. Their bigger noses allowed them to better breathe cold air, and they're small. They're sort of more stocky stature. Like if you see in a lot of like cold areas, that animals tend to evolve a smaller surface area so that they can retain heat better.
Sure.
And yeah, so you see a lot of these different things happening all the time. Then humans happened. So modern humans evolved from Homo erectus in Africa about sometime in the last 200,000 years. And then this is the current theory. This is not 100%. This is like kind of one of those situations that as a science communicator, I'm sure you've run into many times, Trace, where it's like, this is the current theory. There are multiple theories, but overwhelmingly, this is the one that the people are most into. And this one's called the out of Africa theory, which is that humans anatomically, Homo sapiens originated in Africa, evolving in isolated regional groups that occasionally intermingled because the climate kept changing. As we mentioned, these ice age periods were periods of like cold, dry, followed by warm and wet, like in like a sort of cycle, which meant that there was a lot of moving around involved. So that's why these humans moved all over the place. But genetically, anatomically, modern humans originated in Africa and then basically spread across the world, replacing the other humans that lived there. And yeah, my next point here, the human genome originated in Africa with genetic influences from various regions across the continent, as suggested by Rick Potts, director of the Smithsonian's Human Origins Program.
Hey,
boy.
Look at that. It's like I knew he was coming.
Yeah.
He's very nice. I liked him. I liked talking to him a lot.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, he was great.
Best evidence shows that we left Africa about 210,000 years ago, but that there were significant migrations about leaving Africa between 50 and 60,000 years ago. And in that period, we essentially outcompeted and replaced all of the other Homo species, but not without having some very fun times with them. And you can see that in the fact that in a significant portion of our DNA, you can find genetic evidence that we have heavily interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans, especially. And you can see that in the places where they live, because if you have, if your ancestry comes primarily from Western Europe, specifically France and Spain, you actually there's a higher percentage of Neanderthal DNA in your backstory. And if you are from, say, East Asia, there's a higher percentage of Denisovan DNA.
That makes sense.
And as we talked about how this happened, and it how when species interbreed, it does cause problems. And this is extremely speculative, so this is not verified in any meaningful way, but there are some things that link that like type 2 diabetes might have some prevalence in people with higher percentages of Neanderthal DNA, and it might be a result of some genetic issues from that ancient interbreeding. And
that's cool.
And same with Denisovans, the different disease that I, for some reason, decided to not write down as a smart person. But then, we've also keep discovering new ones with unique traits like Homo floresiensis, which is the hobbits. Main things that make us different from apes is that bipedalism, increased brain size, lengthened limbs, and decreased sexual dimorphism.
Gotcha.
Ooh. I wrote down when I did my video on this similar topic, the 4 F's. Is there swearing on this podcast?
Yeah, there's plenty.
Great. So it's fighting, food, filth, and fucking.
Yep.
Yeah. So we have modern humans competing for food. There's filth, which would be like disease that spreads between human groups that would cause, increased evolutionary pressures. And then we, of course, got the fun one, the fuck. So that one where you get a lot of mixing. And I talked to Teresa. I can't remember her last name, but she is at UC Davis. And she was also fantastic. And she said there's obviously evidence of interbreeding where people, she said, quote, run up and love each other, hopefully in a friendly way. That's pretty good.
Maybe Homo sapiens, maybe we don't actually know what our cutting edge is that edged everybody out, but maybe it's the fact that we were just the horniest or the hottest. We could just go there.
Is that like a theory? That would be a great theory. It's just
the
like
sexy ape theory.
The sexy ape theory. I love it. It's just like modern humans show up. They're all lanky. They're like, hey,
what's up?
And Neanderthals are just like, yo, look at you are out of his league. You are way out of his league. And they're like, he's into me. We're gonna move to Corsica. It's gonna be great.
Oh boy. It's that would be perfect.
I love
and we just out hornied the other hominid species until we were the only ones left.
Honestly, I'm not even a surprise. When I would believe that you presented at a conference, I'd be like, yep,
checks out.
That makes sense.
Makes sense. But some of these traits have very interesting evolutionary traces and stuff that is difficult to really suss out. The biggest one that is probably most defining, because we're currently using it to destroy the planet we live on, is encephalization, which is the increase of the size and complexity of our brain. It's one of the distinguishing features of humans. Probably the thing that's going to end up causing our extinction. But it allowed us to do a few things that also accelerated our evolution, which is social learning, language acquisition, and cognitive abilities.
Yes.
Which one of the articles that I didn't put in for time was this whole idea that one of the things that made us advance so fast is that we learned how to basically evolve by creating idiomes, where we basically created ideas that evolved in their own way through artificial changing and it evolved at a much faster rate, and that we were able to no longer have to relearn everything from scratch over and over again, and that allowed us to produce a whole lot of other things. That should be considered part of evolution, or sort of mimetic evolution as part of it. And that is all with language, but that is complicated because, as I learned, that there are apes like chimpanzees that have some of the things capable of doing language, but they can't. And we've tried very, very hard to teach chimpanzees to talk, and they just can't figure it out. And
they don't have anything to say.
They're just a strong silent type. They're like, it's not that they can't speak. They just they just choose to listen.
They're better listeners. Yeah, exactly.
You know what it is? It's because all the researchers are showing up and they're like, damn, they look good,
It's the sexy ape theory.
They're all just really introverted, and they're just like, wow.
all the chimps are just going like this.
They're just they want to hang out with me. Oh my god.
I don't even have to do anything. This is cool.
Oh man. But yeah, the origin of human culture and language is actually one of the more tricky parts to try and study. Human research on animal behavior and human cognitive development only gives us some limited insights, because we don't really have other animals that are closely related to us that have developed language to this level of sophistication. And trying to infer where speech came from studying the cranial remains of fossils is defined as both challenging and inconclusive, because it's hard to study brains with bones.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
or behaviors.
Yeah.
Like what those bones did is tough.
It's like size, just like with many things, size doesn't matter because like there are animals today that don't have the same level of intelligence as us that have brains several times the size of ours. Like elephants, very smart, not exactly at the human level, but their brains are like probably like 8-9 times bigger than ours.
Yeah. And as we constantly discuss on this show, my head is small. And so my brain my giant human brain must be crammed in there. My big brain must be just like crumpled up inside of there.
Well, that's the thing is apparently the more crumpled your brain is actually a higher sign of whether or not you have intelligence than size.
Yep, I know it. I know it. That's me. My tiny head squeezing that brain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the problem is we can't fossilize thought, right?
Yeah. Thought fossils don't exist yet.
Thought fossils.
You can't mummify speech.
You've hit on exactly the phrasing that we've brought up a lot on this. That it's sort of been like a running joke on the show, which is at some point in the show, Ancient Aliens, someone says the phrase "words are thought fossils," and like such the cool. Like it's like for some reason it like to me goes really hard in a way that it shouldn't from Ancient Aliens. Words are thought fossils. I'm like, fuck, that goes hard. That's awesome.
That's cool. That is cool. What a good phrase.
Yeah. So the way that we try to study development is by studying tool development and art. And the thing is that we've learned through studying animals as well that like the part of intelligence that develops tools and how to use them is different from the part that involves art and how to use it. We found hominids that developed art but not tools but not art, and varying degrees of each. And so how humans got like a rich symbolically mediated language and religions and social systems, we don't exactly know how or why or what factors drove it, because evolutionarily it is a massive investment. It takes up 2% of our body weight but uses 20% of our body's energy and is probably the defining aspect of us as a species.
Big brains.
The beginning of culture, as far as we can tell, happened about 50,000 years ago when we started to transition to cultural and behavioral advancements.
Yeah.
And even today, there's an ongoing factor of evolution influenced by natural selection, by genetic drift, and by cultural factors such as agriculture and lifestyle changes. Mm-hmm. And so it's still an ongoing process to this day.
We're still evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And every now and then, if you listen to Jean-Luc Picard, evolution leaps forward.
Yes.
And we end up with X-Men.
One big leap. I was rewatching because I made a video about the X-Men movies recently, and I watched that very first like opening monologue from the first X-Men. So good.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Superhero movies knew what they were doing before they became all what movies are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They were like, I gotta hook them real good. Let's write a great monologue at the beginning. Let's make a
good movie. Let's not just produce another factory line CGI mess.
And have like one of the best actors like of our time deliver that like sci-fi monologue. And it's so good.
Yes.
Patrick Stewart, just like Jack Black. Patrick Stewart's just like Jack Black in the sense that there's never been a time where they don't earn their paychecks.
Yeah, 100%.
They could be doing the most ridiculous thing and they will go so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. The only thing that is motivating me to try and check out that Mario movie, and sometime apparently Jack Black goes so hard in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard the same. He's did a great job.
And how do we know all this stuff? Well, the main things we use is genetic. We use our DNA.
All right.
We have found that there's a high degree of similarity between us and chimpanzees.
Cool.
So if we were genetically engineered by aliens, the chimpanzees might play a role because it's like 90-something% similar. We've used something called a molecular clock, which is a technique where you use mutation rate of biomolecules to deduce the time in prehistory when two life forms diverged. Such a cool idea.
That is neat.
And there is a strange alien that also helps us out, which is a little alien that lives in all of our cells and makes ATP for us, which is something called our mitochondria.
Yay, the powerhouse of the cell.
That's right.
And we don't know exactly where they came from, but it's highly thought that they are another organism that early cells just ate one day, and then it just lived, and it was a symbiotic relationship, and now they're just here. And it leads to an interesting quirk, which is that mitochondria has its own DNA, and it only passes down to us from our mother. mothers. And this is sort of how we can tell about like the migration out of Africa for all humans, because mitochondrial Eve, as we've like kind of studied, because like there was one mother who was related to every living human on Earth, and she existed about 200,000 years ago, which would time to the time when we left the continent and moved across the world.
That's neat. So cool.
Yeah. And fossils. We have a lot of fossils. There's a limited amount of fossils, but it shows that we have a pretty detailed hominid lineage. It turns out there's a lot of interest in studying this. So all across the Central and Central South Africa, there's tons of paleontological research and digging done to figure it out. And we see, despite what Ancient Aliens has said earlier, we see the evolution of encephalization, the increasing brain capacity. We see the development of tool use. We see like in writing, like we see all these like processes start to show that do not require any genetic engineering to do so, and it's just there, and so we can see it. And the thing is that like that this is in many ways they're just doing creationism, like intelligent design. It's irreducible complexity all over again in many ways. The thing is, also, we've done genetic engineering, and we know that there are telltale signs when an animal is transgenic. There's like there are things that intelligent genetic engineering does that evolution doesn't. And you can always evolved systems have a sort of a style, because there's no editor to make things clean or easy. And so evolutionary processes or natural processes are overly complicated and very weird, because it's just there was no guiding principle behind it. And there's no sign that there's anything that shows real efficiency in how we do anything.
Right.
We're a big old mess. And I feel like if our intelligence had been genetically engineered by humans, we wouldn't have a brain that breaks in so many interesting ways, or a brain that you can just cut out half of if you're like a child and can survive. Or
I think of it as like Photoshop.
Yes.
If you think of Photoshop, even really, really good Photoshop, sometimes you can tell. Or like CGI, once you get used to seeing it, you can tell exactly where the CGI is, or you can tell what part of a beautiful sunset where they're like, oh, I painted out like a giant building that used to be there. Like you can kind of tell. So it's silly to me when people are like, oh, well, maybe we were genetically engineered in these ways, and there's no way anybody can prove me wrong. And it's like, no, they can, because they look at it every day. Similar to like asking like one of these many YouTube videos that's like, look at the CGI in here, you can see how it works, and this is how it's just like they're experts in this. They literally look at genetics all day.
I'd probably say that, and maybe the fruit fly is actually the winner here, but I would probably put up there that the human genetic code is probably up there with the most studied genome on Earth. I feel like humans have a distinct interest in that DNA for scientific and medical purposes. I'm going to learn later that like actually the fruit fly DNA is the most studied or something. But
fruit flies and roundworms are both nematodes, both pretty well studied. Drosophila.
So we would probably like if there were signs of actual genetic tampering of things that look like they were artificial insertions, they would appear distinct, because evolution's a messy bitch, and it does whatever it wants with our DNA, and we're suffering for it in some ways, because like as I said, evolving bipedalism wasn't perfect, and our spines and legs and knees sort of pay the price when we get into our 30s.
Can I give a weird example that's been coming to my mind as you've been talking about this, that's not related to animals, but is about we all do video stuff, and you were mentioning Photoshop. One of my favorite things that Adobe does is because a lot of their programs have been like being added onto and tweaked and stuff for decades, they rarely ever get rid of anything. And so when they want to improve something, like many years ago, they made a brand new way to use text in Adobe Premiere. And it was a brand new system, but they had an old system that you could still use, but they didn't know how to get rid of it without breaking everything. So they just like, they just wrote in parentheses obsolete next to it and stapled on the new system. And it's like, even they are doing this sort of thing where they're just like, all right, here's a new thing we want you to use. And here's this other, they're like these, like you're saying, these like sort of telltale signs of like, it's definitely been tweaked in a way that, I don't know. I just found that interesting. Yeah.
Because you can see it. You can see in our DNA, like the entire genetic code of retroviruses that have just been absorbed into our genetic code and just have sat there for millions of years and not done anything.
Yeah.
Retroviruses are viruses that actually join into our DNA. It's why like HIV is so hard to attack because it's a retrovirus. But like sometimes they just join and then they just get added to the code. They just they join the chromosomes and or things like the fact that we're very close to having some severe, and not very close, evolutionarily close to having a severe issue with male DNA because the Y chromosome's disappearing, and that might cause some problems.
Detrimental effect.
If climate change doesn't get us in a few million years in the future, it might be a problem.
Yeah.
Hopefully by then we'll have figured it out.
Yeah.
And there's other stuff too, like how evolution doesn't necessarily choose for beneficial things. One of the cases that they tried to make for alien DNA was Rh negative blood types, which apparently is very big in the Basque region, which I guess Basques are aliens.
Sure.
Which you could break. They have a very unique language and all sorts of stuff. This is probably why they have the Rh negative, because they're probably very genetically isolated. But the thing is that if you are Rh negative in your blood type and you are pregnant with an Rh positive baby, your body will attack that and will often kill that baby. There's a medical intervention today, but like in the past, if like two people were to get married, they had to do a test to make sure that it would work, especially in like these sort of Western European regions.
Yeah, we had to do it. Because I have Spanish ancestry. So they were like, we should. And my wife's Brazilian, so she has like Iberian ancestry as well. So they're like, hey, we should probably do this check. It's probably going to be fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
If you've ever donated blood and you ever see on your card if you're like Rh negative or Rh positive, Rh negative blood is very rare. So there is that. But the thing is, in the past, a lot of times their baby would just die if they were Rh positive. So what would happen is that if you want to pull out your little Punnett square, if you were a Rh negative person and you were breeding with an Rh positive person, and even if your kids
Trace is visually spelling it out in the air.
Yeah, and even if your kids die if they're Rh positive, then you still have about a like 50% chance of having either a decent chance of having either a double negative Rh negative or a heterozygous Rh positive, in which case the kids would live. And if you can see, it's almost as if it like, even though it's detrimental because it kills if you are Rh negative, you kill a good percentage of the babies you have, you're still causing selection pressure towards more Rh negative genes because basically it just kills these babies. And that is a thing. It's like, it's not a beneficial mutation, but it is a mutation that just exists. And Ancient Aliens brought this out because I didn't mention this at the beginning, but they use this as an example of like, well, why would Rh negative DNA exist if it was detrimental? And it's like, because we can't stop fucking is the thing. We lose babies and they just have more.
Theory.
Sexy ape theory.
That's what comment. This, you know what, you guys, we need to get a paper going. This is going to be it. We got to get this.
This feels right to me. Yeah.
I was thinking sickle cell anemia, which
that's
is
a really good one. Yeah.
A genetic trait that is passed down that is very detrimental, but not so detrimental that it kills necessarily, but it does affect quality of life. But it doesn't kill you before you could potentially breed if you're, an ancient person who breeds as early as possible. Like you can live to 15 years old and you've passed on your genes and your sickle cell anemia might hurt you. But it's like these kind of mutations exist everywhere in human society across the world. But it's like, if we had engineered people, why would we give their red blood cells, pointy boomerang shapes?
Right.
It doesn't it wouldn't make any sense.
Well, because the thing about sickle cell anemia, and that's why it's so prevalent in African populations, and like sickle cell anemia is an issue with a lot of Black Americans, is because while it did cause health issues, it actually made their red blood cells more resistant to malaria.
Yes.
And a lot of I'm just right now reading a book on this topic because the people who were taken from Africa to become slaves in America were taken from the regions that had the most malaria because they were dealing with malaria in the American South and in like the Caribbean, and they needed people who were actually more resistant to work there. And because of that, like malarial resistance, they were like, you could see like in parts like the Chesapeake region, like in the summers, the sort of the white population would like plummet, and then like in the winters, because of the horrible conditions that Black people were kept under, they would like die of exposure, and so like there'd be like these like kind of like weird population dips and stuff like that, and it has to do with malaria.
Oh wow, that's awful.
Yeah,
the anemia one with malarial resistance is fascinating, really fascinating.
Also, I'm bald. I think that's a genetic thing, and I
that's a hormone thing. It's testosterone.
Is it testosterone? I was always told it was a genetic thing. I mean, I guess it always is with the hormones and such.
It has genetic links, but the thing about males is that we have the way that our hormones work is that we are designed to be very big and very powerful, but then like as soon as we hit a certain peak age, our bodies start falling apart.
Yeah, very big, very powerful. That's me.
Like human, like male, like what's it called? Like XY chromosome bodies like start falling apart after a certain age, just because.
No, not me.
That's why we die on average so much earlier and such.
Nah.
It's a whole thing.
We're not needed. We're extraneous.
But Trace, it's not extraneous. Your new podcast. Can you tell us about it?
Hey, nice transition. Yeah, new podcast. It's called That's Absurd. Please elaborate. I mentioned it at the top of the show. Basically, my friend Julian and I got together, and we have created so many things over the years, and we've made all these videos, and we've done all this stuff. But it's like there are still these nagging, silly questions that we had, and we thought, let's do real sciencey research on some of these questions. So, like some of them are very silly, like what is the pointiest thing? We did in an episode once, which was really cool. I'm not going to spoil it, but it's very neat and we talked about like how it's made and what it is. It's tungsten needle. It's very, very small. It's very cool. And so that one is like, you could Google it and find it. So we explain not only what it is, we don't just answer it. We go a little further beyond that. And we talk about what it is, but why it's made, how it's made. But we also ask ones that like have no real answer. Like if humans disappeared, what species would take over next? So I looked up a bunch of different authors who'd written about it, and the answer might be no species. But it was like really neat to look at the different ones that people thought might, step up and have some of the things that we have in terms of just planetary dominance. And so it was just, it's a really fun science podcast in that it's not scholarly research necessarily, but we're taking our science communication skills and trying to answer silly questions. And we've done 9 episodes so far, so it's fairly new, but we're already getting audience questions. And so we've got an audience question from a 5-year-old. How long would it take to build a Lego replica of the sun? And so that was a really fun question to figure out. There was a lot more math than I normally would do in an episode, but it was neat to think about like, okay, what is the mass of that many Lego pieces and what would we end up doing to our own solar system? And, we talked about Dyson spheres and how the difficulty of building a sphere around the sun in general, let alone out of Lego, would be.
Lego Dyson sphere playset. Come on, someone make that happen.
I know. So we have a really good time, and we release them every other week. We have hit our target every time. So one just came out today, actually. Today's episode, let's see. Today's episode is called Scores of Mutual Nightmares. And the questions that we had are about what if you could plug a volcano with concrete? Was one of the questions, which was really cool.
Yeah, that was like a Twitter thing that was someone was asking a while back too. That was very fun.
So we have that one in today's episode, and we also So we try and do 2 questions an episode, or if we have a guest, we'll do a 3rd question as well. So it's really, really a good time.
Oh, that sounds like so much fun.
Sounds like a great podcast to listen to after I've enjoyed a gummy candy that exists in a childproof drawer in my kitchen. I'm in Canada, it's legal. You can buy from the government.
California. I'm in California. It's legal. Hey.
Yeah. And also like enjoy Udodos of Trace, your YouTube channel.
Oh yeah. My YouTube channel is just my name. Trace Dominguez is the URL or the handle they have now. My most recent video is on long COVID. It's done really, really well, surprisingly well, like way more views than I normally do.
Awesome.
Because people want to know like what long COVID is. I called Dr. Zaid Al-Ali, who works used to work with the VA. I can't remember exactly. I think it's with the Cleveland Clinic now. And he is studying this now and what long COVID is. And it's actually connected to essentially a post-viral infection that's been around for as long as we've had viral infections. Sometimes the virus isn't cleared or we don't really know what the problem is. And now it's just affecting millions more people than it used to. And so we're getting a lot of comments on the channel about, people who have MECFS, which is one of the names of this post-viral infection. And they're like saying, thank you for making this because they've been suffering for decades. And long COVID is just the first time that popular culture culture is starting to see what this is. So I try and make videos that I'm curious about and that I'm interested in. And I hope other people like them too.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that's awesome. And thanks so much for coming on the show again.
Yeah, that was really fun.
But now, Scott, if I wanted to learn about, as I open up your Nebula channel.
You always point to a specific video of mine, and these come out like weeks afterwards.
I know. It's part of the fun. Nerdsync. If I were to learn about My Sweet Thunder Boy is Sad, the tragedy of Thor.
Oh my God, that came out years ago.
I just wrote Nerdsync into the search. That was the first one that came up. If I were to learn about why your Sweet Thunder Boy is sad, where would I want to go?
You can go to my YouTube channel, Nerdsync, NERDSYNC. I've got a bunch of videos. That was one from like 2019. If you want to watch that one, but I have made at least some videos since then. So go check it out. I talk about comics and superheroes and cartoons and other stuff, and I use them to teach about real world history, philosophy, culture, art, and also just talk about me and in my life and stuff like that. So if you're interested in that, that's my channel. But Tristan, you've got a bunch of I feel like you've been cranking out videos recently. What have you been up to?
I run a YouTube channel called Step Back. It's a channel about why history is important for making the modern day make sense to you. My most recent video was about China and basically trying to tell a modern history of China without trying to sell either side of the new Cold War dynamic that we're on. So without trying to turn it into the main hero or main villain of history. And that was surprisingly hard because nobody wants to give you a straight answer on that country. And I'm currently working, because this is VidCon month, so I have a whole week that I can't work. I'm making a US president tier list.
Oh, like ranked? U.S. presidents ranked? That's fun. Is Franklin Pierce at the bottom or like close to the bottom?
I haven't recorded it yet, but I will say that very few get a top tier ranking. There is one. There is one that is the best president in history, and everybody should follow in his model. And you will find out in early July when it comes out. I'll tell you guys after we're done recording.
I have so many thoughts. I want to know all of the. Oh, interesting. I love that.
You can find that at Step Back on YouTube. And also this show, if you want to support this show, one of the greatest places you can do that is to go to nebula.tv/probablynotaliens and sign up for Nebula and watch episodes early, or listen to episodes early, I should say. And support the show as long as you're on it. And of course, if you don't want to spend your well-earned dollary dues on that, you can leave us reviews on your podcatcher platform of
Apple
choice.
Podcast reviews are great. You can tell your friends about
putting them on USB keys. Putting them on USB keys and throwing them at people is a pretty good way.
That's what we always recommend.
That works really well.
Very great website. It's just probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everything for our show that you can find. I think that's everything. So Trace, thank you again so much for being on. It was a pleasure and just a blast. It was very fun.
Well, thanks for having me.
Until next time, I am Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson.
I'm Trace Dominguez.
And the truth is out there. Ook, ook, probably.
Oog, oog, probably.
Caveman.
Like a caveman would say. Like the Geico. You should have just sold insurance at the end, like the Geico caveman.
I thought Geico's logo was a gecko.
Oh, Geico has they have like a zillion.
They have 8 of them. Do you know
they have
so
caveman?
Many?
I don't think we have Geico in this country.
No, it's the government employee insurance company, so you probably wouldn't have them.
We can't go down the Geico caveman rabbit hole. They had their own TV show for a couple episodes before it got canceled.
Okie dokie.
Yeah. A commercial spin-off into a TV show. America's Crazy.
That's called Ted Lasso.
Also true. Also true. Wow.
One of those is better